just to say hello to everybody, and thanks very much for coming. This is the second in our Galloway Footsteps events. We've got a series of 4 events going on for the Galloway Footsteps, which some of you may or may not have been to the first one, but if you haven't been to the first one, then don't worry. My name's Helen Kerrin. I'm the Community and Education and Community Engagement Officer for the Galloway Glens Landscape Partnership Scheme. I'll introduce, we've got some speakers there, Caris and Abby, who you might be able to see there, but I'll introduce them in a minute properly. Now, for those of you who know, I'm going to have to do a quick run through of the Galloway Glens. I know a lot of you know it already, but you know I have to do it. So we're a 5-year project funded by the Heritage Lottery and based in the Galloway Glens, which is in southwest Scotland, very rural southwest Scotland, going in through past the sort of wild uplands of the behind Carsfairn and the Glen Kens, and then through Dalryba, McClellan, New Galloway, out past beautiful Loch Ken, the market town of Castle Douglas, and out to the sea at Cockubry. So a beautiful area, very rural, quite agricultural, and a combination of wild and villages and towns. So that's us, and it was so special that the Heritage Lottery said, well, 3 years ago now, that we could be a landscape partnership scheme. So we're funded for 5 years to the tune of £5 million. So that's been quite a big investment into the area over the years so far, and hopefully some of you who are here have seen the benefits of that. It all has to be done in partnership. That's a key feature of the scheme. So we partner with people in different activities, different projects, and for this one we're partnering with the Crichton Carbon Centre, and Caris is here from the Crichton Carbon Centre for that. A lot of work behind the scenes as well, and also the D&G Council Environment team had a lot of support from them in planning this. Yes, in partnership, and also we've been delighted to for this one to partner with Giki, which we'll come on to in just a little bit, but Giki is a carbon footprint calculator that allows you to measure your carbon footprint, but also improve it. It shows you little steps and to make a real difference. And that's the kind of whole principle of these events. We want to show you individual actions that when we add them all up together make a really big difference, and we want to demonstrate that they do make a difference. The events are on 4 different themes, which you'll see aligned with Giki. So we did what to buy last month. That was really interesting with Anna Pitt. And that's up on the Galloway Glens YouTube channel. So if you've missed it, you can go back and catch up. This one's what we eat. So that's with Abby about all our food choices and our actions around food. And we've got 2 more about inside the home and outside the home in the following months. So I think that's all I wanted to say just as an introduction to the overall programme. I have muted everybody now. My settings are obviously wrong for people coming in, but everybody's muted now, and we will stay muted because there's a few people online. So if you've got any questions, then do pop them into the chat is the best way. And obviously we've got Abby and Caris here, a huge amount of knowledge in the room. So, you know, fire away with the questions, and we'll break for questions at the end. So I'm just going to share my screen just now. Okay. So yeah, so welcome and introductions. I'm going to do a quick overview of Giki for those of you who aren't familiar with it, and then I'm going to hand straight over to Abby. We'll have a quick Q&A then after that, because I'm quite sure that will spark some ideas, and then Caris is going to take us through some more steps that you can take, some sort of really concrete actions you can do, and I've got a little bit to add to that as well in terms of what's happening locally in the Galloway Glens area. More opportunity for Q&A, and then some of you I know are already in Team Galloway, which is what we're calling our Giki community. So I've signed up to Giki, and we're all working together to see our effect. Now, if you're not in that, it doesn't matter. You're obviously welcome to stay and find out what's happening, or and to join. Indeed, it's never too late to join. So that's where we're going to go, and I'm just going to take the opportunity to introduce Abby and Caris properly. Abby, I think if people want to speak, if you just want to unmute and say hello so people can see you.
Yeah, hello, I'm over here.
Oh yeah, so there's Abby. Abby is a founder member of Propagate, which I think some of you in the area might have heard of. It's a not-for-profit food charitable organisation, and a seasoned food activist. She's been working across community and local food projects for over 20 years, and is passionate about food sovereignty and resilience. An experienced grower, facilitator, practitioner and researcher, Abby's inclusive and collaborative attitude encourages everyone to be involved in thinking about and creating sustainable food systems. Abby's chair and co-founder of the Glasgow Community Food Network, co-founder of the Glasgow Food Policy Partnership, and holds an MSc in food security. So I think it's fair to say we're very lucky to have her here in the Glenkens. Caris, if you want to just say hello briefly.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah, that's Caris' main prize. Caris is the Projects and Communications Officer at the Crichton Carbon Centre. She's passionate about sustainable living and tackling climate change, and is currently personally working on cutting her carbon footprint down to 2.5 tonnes a year, which some of you might have seen. That's the 2025 target that we all need to be running to limit the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. So huge commitment from Caris there, and I know you did a lot of research in the work up to it. Previously, Caris worked at the Langham Initiative, running the Wild Eskdale project, which brought environmental education to Langham and Canterbury schools, and now more of a Dumfries and Galloway wide remit. So that's Abby and Caris, and I'm now just going to share my screen again to talk a little bit briefly through Giki. So I don't know if any of you have signed up. Well, I know some of you have signed up to Giki, and I know some of you are enjoying it very much. So it is sort of ridiculously engaging. When you think of a carbon footprint calculator, you don't necessarily think of something that you can actually sit and do in preference to watching the telly. But it's called Giki Zero, your step-by-step guide to a lighter footprint on the planet. It's a social enterprise. It stands for Get Informed and Know Your Impact. And again, I think that's what these sessions for us is a lot about, is getting informed. You know, once you know, then you can start to make changes. Founded in 2017 as a social enterprise, so it's a not-for-profit, and just got this mission to create personalised steps to suit everyone's lifestyle, budget and priorities to help people live more sustainably. Here are some stats. They can get overwhelming, which is why we're trying to focus this project on what we as individuals can do. But the reality is that 36 billion tonnes of carbon are emitted each year globally, and 8 million new pieces of plastic enter the oceans. 70% of deforestation is for agriculture, and partly to do with that, 1 million species at risk of extinction. So, you know, I'm not going to over stress it, but this stuff is real, and I think there's an increasing understanding that we all need to play our part in doing something about it, and hopefully this is part of informing you to know how to do that. So this is the decade for action. If we're going to do it, we've got to do it now. You can see here the inexorable rise of the global emissions, so dramatic change needed. And again, individual action. This is where this is not coincidentally, this is Caris's personal target of 2.5 tonnes. But this is where we are as a nation at the moment on 9 tonnes a person. So again, it's about understanding. And here again, you see these categories that align with our 4 events of the purchases, which was last month, food this month, inside the home next month, and transport and services the month after. So, you know, hopefully you can see if you're inspired to take action, you can use Giki to help you log those. So I am just going to pop briefly over to here. Can you still see that as a live web page? Yeah, great. So if you sign up to Giki, and it's free, and there's no commitment or anything, but it allows you to assess where you are. So you might go on to progress, and my Giki score is 450, and the higher the better. It's not your carbon footprint, it's a score, so the higher the better. I've answered quite a lot of questions about myself to allow them to do that baseline, which is actually a really interesting exercise in its own right. So I gave in all the information about how I live at home, and my food choices, my transport, my purchases, and it put that all in to create my personalized baseline. And then from there, I can choose my steps that I can take to try and improve my score and cut my carbon footprint. So I'm trying to cut a tonne in 21. I'm choosing sustainable palm or palm oil free products. Take your pension pot away from fossil fuel companies. I was really surprised at the impact that has on my carbon footprint. So that's something I'm working on. And plant some pollinator friendly flowers, which are mostly dandelions at the moment, but that's fine. So So and then it's coming here, and it's telling me some suggested steps that I could do, and some other steps that other people are using. So that's a real whistle-stop tour. If you like the concept of it, I would say just sign up, because there's really no downside. It's super engaging, it's super easy to use, and again, it informs you and it helps you plan out how you're going to start making a difference. So as I say, we've created ourselves a community. We've called it Team Galloway, but it's open to everybody. If you sign, you can either just email myself, and there's details at the end, or you can just sign up for Giki and then email myself and I'll put you into the team, or you can just join Giki. But I would encourage you to have a look at that. But that's all that is. So I think without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Abby for what I know is going to be a really excellent talk.
Brilliant. Thank you, Helen. I should probably have a look at Giki myself at some point. Great, it's lovely to be here, and thanks everybody for having me along, and great to see some familiar faces and some familiar names in the audience. I'm going to speak for somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes. I haven't timed it, and my plan is to give you a broad overview of kind of what's going on with our global food system, and then zone in on some practical things that we can do and that are already happening, things that are already going on across Scotland, to tackle some of these big issues. So I'm going to share my screen from here. Okay, so I'll start with a little bit of an overview of Propagates, just as a bit of an opener. Propagates is a worker cooperative, and that means that there are no managers. We support each other through a kind of mutual support and kind of collaborative work kind of way. So there are about 10 people who work with Propagates, and we all work on different projects across Glasgow, across Dumfries and Galloway, and across Argyll and Bute as well. We were founded in 2016, and most of us have got a good track record of about 10 or so or plus sort of years in sustainable and resilient food work before that. So what do? We do community gardening. We have helped many projects set up community growing spaces, from schools projects to sort of the pictures here are actually from Baltic Street Adventure Playground, which is in the east end of Glasgow. We've worked with sort of women's hostels, with women at risk of homelessness and sort of drug addiction, that kind of thing. Adults with learning disabilities, etc. And we call our community gardening program Cultivates. So we did sort of a mixture of kind of garden design, growth, and building the spaces, and then teaching horticultural skills as well. We teach a program called Veg Power. Veg Power is really fun and engaging, practical cooking about how you can use seasonal and locally sourced vegetables better, or just more vegetables really. So we try and kind of focus on a veg of the week. So each week has might be about beetroots, might be about turnips, and we'll have 3 to 4 dishes about with creative ways that you can cook with veg. And we'll come on to why that is, I guess, during the rest of this talk. Hidden Veg is, we're familiar to some of you. Hidden Veg is a market garden in the Glen Kens, about 3 miles from Balmaclellan, which is where I'm sitting. And it's Propagates market garden. So it has its own identity, known as Hidden Veg locally, but it's part of the Propagate family. We're on about half an acre to 3/4 of an acre now. I've just kind of upscaled a little bit in this season. 1 polytunnel and a whole lot of outdoor spaces. So we grow lots of seasonal produce. We sell to the local people in Balmaclellan, Dalry and New Galloway. And I've got a trainee, a young lass from New Galloway who's funded through DWP, that's Department of Work and Pensions Kickstarter scheme. And we have Thursday afternoon volunteer sessions. So this is Neil, who comes all the way up from Knock-and-Ken to help on a Thursday afternoon with our kind of harvesting and packing as well. We also do things like community-led food and green space design. So this is a kind of sort of practical community engagement and action research where another organisation will usually ask us to look at a space There might be a large piece of derelict land or underused land or semi-rewilded land in the case, the picture on top there. And yeah, we'll kind of run a sort of practical outreach program to ask people, what would you want to do with this space, and involve people in the design process. So that we're doing that with a space called SWG3 in Glasgow at the moment, which is Studio Workshop Glasgow, and it's a studio spaces, a venue, and they've got this space out the back they want to turn into a sort of community food space, which is quite exciting. And then our final kind of core work is around sustainable and resilient food systems. So it's a kind of mixture of different things, and I'll talk about some of this as we go through. But as an example, one thing that I'm facilitating here in Galloway is a series of dialogues, they're called Fork to Farm dialogues, and it's engaging farmers and food producers with local authority policy officers in D&G in South Ayrshire and East Ayrshire. And we're meeting each month for about an hour, and we're talking around the themes of food, agriculture and climate change, to look at what we can collectively do and what we need to do to address farming for reducing carbon emissions in the farming system, what we can do together, and what we need to do what councils need to do, what the Scottish Government needs to do, and what our key messages for COP26 are as well. And a little bit about me. I've been growing food pretty much all my life, learning next to my dad when I was very tiny. I've been doing food education and food systems work for about 25 years, first working in a market garden back in the 90s in West Wales, where I'm from originally. I've just moved to Galloway about a year and a half ago, but before that I was 13 years in Glasgow, or near Glasgow. I was living on a community farm in South Lanarkshire, about 25 miles out of the city, where we had a market garden there as well, but doing a whole range of the community food work that I've described above. I'm driven really by environmental justice and social justice, and I see food as the intersection between those two things. Yeah, I've always got lots and lots of projects on the go. So ask a busy person, etc. So what's up with the food system? Now, this is a little bit of a quiz. I don't expect people to be shouting out or answering the actual questions, but you can see the questions, and as I click through, the answers are going to come up. So I'm going to give you a few seconds to think about each one. And these are broadly taken from a range of different sources and borrowed from a circular economy team in a local authority. So first up, what percentage of crops are UK farmers forced to waste annually? And this is forced to waste because they maybe don't meet the retail standards. We're talking about wonky veg kind of stuff. I'm sure you might have an answer in your head. It's 10 to 16%. It may have been higher, may have been lower than you were thinking. How many times faster are we losing soil than it's being formed, bearing in mind it takes roughly 100 years to make roughly 10 centimetres of topsoil. That's for the Earth to make, our planets to make that through various different geological processes. So how many times are we losing soil than it's being formed? 100 times. Yeah, that's a big wow, and that is, this is globally, this is not specifically Scotland, but this is largely speaking through building projects, but also through agriculture and soil erosion. How much food is wasted before it even reaches our plates? Food waste, very much in the news, in our minds at the moment. It's about 30%. Okay. Junk food industry, big spenders. I mean, I actually don't have a television, so I'm immune from the adverts, but I'm going to imagine what they're like. How many more times promoting products than the government spends on healthy eating? 30 times more spent on promoting junk food. Gallons of water needed to produce one hamburger. And this is an arguable point because obviously there's various different forms of farming and agriculture, which I'm going to come on to. But averagely speaking, it's 660 gallons. And what is a gallon is it's a gallon's quite about that much, broadly speaking. Okay, and finally, the global food system accounts for what percentage of greenhouse gas emissions? And some of you may well know this answer already. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change puts it at around about 33%, so 1/3 essentially of greenhouse gas emissions are from the global food system. So that does not specifically mean production, that means all aspects of the food system. So it's everything from production to processing to transportation to packaging to food waste, etc. So, okay. The next few slides are going to talk specifically about Scotland and Dumfries and Galloway. So this is taken from Scottish Government's own sort of statistics. I've drawn a very wonky red line around agriculture. So 7.6 million tonnes of carbon dioxide. We're talking about 7.6 million elephants, essentially. Attributed to agriculture in Scotland's greenhouse gas emissions. That puts agriculture, as you can see, just where are we? We're on this this kind of red line here. So we're just above energy, only slightly, and we're above residential, below business. And you see the energy line has taken quite a tumble over the last few years. Which I haven't actually looked into this, but I wonder if that is attributed to the rise of wind turbines, which I'm sure many of us in Galloway were very well aware of. And another Galloway issue is this line down here, land use, which I wonder, and I don't know, I'm speculating, but I wonder if this is largely speaking attributed to tree planting. And again, we're talking about maybe arguably inappropriate tree planting like Sitka spruce plantations. So yeah, there's arguable points in all of these, but agriculture is sitting at 7.6 million tonnes across Scotland. These figures are taken, a lot of words in this, so about this. I'm not going to read them all out, but these figures are taken from National Farmers Union Scotland, and they're taken from the 2018 agricultural survey and census. So you can see, broadly speaking, for this, and anyone that lives here will know this, that we have a lot of cattle, we have a lot of sheep, we have a lot of dairy, and we produce a lot of milk. Pig numbers are dropping, but they're still there. Poultry is an interesting one. These numbers look big, but actually is a massive shortage of chicken meat in Scotland. And if you ask any council procurement person, they really struggle to get locally sourced and sustainably produced sort of poultry. A lot of our chicken is imported. These ones are interesting to me, particularly as a vegetable grower. 459,000 hectares of cereals and oilseeds compared to just 18,900 hectares of vegetables. So sad. Oh, not forgetting, of course, 27,000 more hectares of potatoes than there were of vegetables. And a lot of this veg is in the East Coast, up in Fife. People will often tell me that you can't grow vegetables in Galloway. I hope to be proving people wrong with nearly an acre, not quite, of lovely, healthy organic produce. And then also people that know the history of the kind of what we love to call the Galloway Riviera will know that it used to be one of the main vegetable producing regions of the UK, right up until that railway line got taken away. Okay. So where does our food actually go? So I don't know if you can see this table. I can see it very clearly, but I imagine it's quite small on your screens. So it's got a comparison of kind of, yeah, where the beef sales are going across the UK. So 167 million of beef in Scotland, rest of the UK buying 432 million of our beef, Scotch beef. Exports totaling 39 million, at only 6%. So most of the beef stays in the UK. Lamb, on the other hand, 26% of lamb actually leaves the shores, and most of it ends up in the EU. Most of it in France and Germany. They're quite fond of Scottish lamb. And I think we have yet to see the effects of Brexit on some of that export. Mentioned those cereal crops earlier, barley, wheat and maize being the main cereal crops, the main one of those being barley, with Scotland having 28% of the UK's proportion of that, 35% of it in whisky mostly, 55% of it in animal feeds. You do the maths, leaves 10% of barley. So the 55% is mostly for an animal feed, which does eventually feed us, as you can see from here. But not directly. So yeah, we've either got to eat more beef or drink more whiskey if you want to eat and drink local. I don't mind the whiskey. I don't mind the beef either, really. Maybe not too much of it. Okay, so that's the Scottish picture. Let's get local. So these figures are taken from Dumfries and Galloway Council's Climate Emergency Action Plan. As you can see, the total emissions were put at 2,597, and of that, agriculture contributing to, or livestock agriculture to 1,172 tonnes, and other agriculture to 248. This subtraction from land use, again, we're talking about probably 6 spruce plantations. But either way you look at it, that's a large amount of Dumfries and Galloway's emissions attributed to agriculture. However, it's quite important to note that there has been no work done amongst Dumfries and Galloway farmers to determine what farming methods people are actually using. So I know for a fact that there's lots of really good practice going on. We can talk about Rainton, which I'm sure lots of people have heard of, the ethical dairy, Creamery Galloway, great work happening there. Tor Organic Farm, also great work happening there. Those on the organic side, there's also some other great work. Robert Fleming down near, I think he's Stewart's kind of way, doing lots of regenerative and conservation agriculture. He's not certified organic, but is absolutely passionate about soil and carbon sequestration. So there has been no actual baseline work done amongst Dumfries and Galloway farmers. So we don't know how accurate this figure actually is. And we are doing some work to address that, which I'll talk about in a minute. The organic picture is also quite interesting. I mentioned Tor and Rainton. There's plenty of others across the region. So Scottish organic produce sales are up. Have been up over the last couple of years. More people understanding that they want to do the right thing and buy organic produce. However, across Scotland, we are looking at the amount of land in organics actually reducing at the moment. Okay, away from food, from agriculture. Some heavy hitting stats here. I'm so sorry about this. Away from agriculture, on food security. Food insecurity is directly related to poverty, and obviously the last year has been particularly difficult, but food insecurity, broadly speaking, on the rise, and this is defined by people worrying about or actually running out of money to feed themselves and their families. Lots and lots of work going on to address that, which I will come to. Okay, and then also biodiversity. A lot of the main drivers of biodiversity loss in Scotland are due to agriculture, unfortunately, and land use of different types. These stats pretty much speak to themselves, and I can share them afterwards. And again, this is probably the biggest one to take away, which is that 68%, changing agricultural management has had the biggest single impact upon nature in the UK as a whole over recent decades. And we know that we live in quite a rural country. Okay. I'm just going to throw this one in. It's not so much part of the problem, although some people might see it as part of the problem. This is the Planetary Health Plate, and this comes from the Eat Lancet reports. The Eat Lancet report was a very kind of well-researched, put together piece of work by a lot of nutritionists and scientists and climatologists. And this is the plate that they said that we should be eating and working towards in order to eat better for the planet, which means massively increasing our fruit and vegetable intake, and it means massively decreasing our animal sourced proteins and dairy. So yeah, I mean, in the context of that, and all the slides that have just gone before about how we produce and what we produce in Scotland, you might be tempted to do that. I know I am sometimes. This is my farming equivalent of an ostrich with a head in the sand, in case that wasn't obvious. Great picture. Oh my God, I might try sticking my head in a hay bale at some point. Okay, the good news is that there is some great work happening all across Scotland, and I'm going to give you a breakdown of some of that, not just in Scotland, but also very locally here. And by the time we finish this, you'll be feeling happy again, I promise. So Nourish Scotland, if you haven't heard of them already, look them up. They're a great organisation. Nourish Scotland have a range of different flagship projects. Peas Please is a civil society movement. You can join Peas Please as a veg ambassador. And veg ambassadors all over Scotland are working locally to promote more vegetables, both with ordinary people, but also in procurement, in catering, in cafes and restaurants. It's a really great initiative. Nourish also are leading, along with the National Farmers Union Scotland, on the Farming for 1.5. Also very worth checking out. They've got their own websites and some really good videos. This is they've already produced one report. They're into the second stage of their inquiry at the moment. They meet on a regular basis as a group of farmers and land managers, and hear evidence from a range of different people. And they have come up with a menu of options for farmers to transform agriculture in a way that can be sustainable. And this is by incorporating practices such as regenerative agriculture, agroecology, agroforestry, and conservation agriculture as well. So yeah, great work happening there. Dignity in Practice is addressing food poverty and food insecurity. And it's about reducing the need for food banks and ensuring that people who are in food insecurity receive food and are able to get food in a dignified way that still values them as human beings. And linked to that is the work around the right to food, which I'm sure some of you are aware of. And the right to food is really about making sure that everybody, no matter of their cultural, social, economic backgrounds, has equal access to affordable, good, culturally appropriate food. So that's some of Nourish's flagship projects, and I mentioned Fork to Farm earlier, which is the dialogue that I'm leading on in this region. That's a Nourish project, a global project. There are other Fork to Farm dialogues happening in Ecuador, in Peru, in South Africa, in Kenya, in Mexico, all over the world. We meet on a regular basis as a community of practitioners, and we're all taking our key messages to COP26. So it's, that's quite an exciting project to be part of. Nourish are also instrumental in the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration. The Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration is global. It's called the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration because of COP26 being in Glasgow in November. But it's a global movement, and it's for subnational governments to sign, and that basically means local authorities and councils to us. But it means different things to different people in different regions. And it's a series of commitments. I think there's 10 or so commitments that local councils are being urged to sign up to tackle food and climate. So I'm working with our local authority here to urge them to sign this before COP26, and I think they will, which is good news. The Scottish Food Coalition was a project of Nourish and now has its own arms and legs. And if you're an organisation, anyone can join if you're committed to sort of sustainable food and agriculture and food for dignity and so forth. And I'll go through their sort of core aims at the moment. This is just an idea of the kind of organisations that are part of the Scottish Food Coalition. It's not a complete list because Propagates actually joined as a member, but they haven't updated their website. I'm actually wearing the Landworkers Alliance t-shirt, as you can see the logo there. So yeah, they're a great network, and some of their work includes the following. So the right to food, which I mentioned earlier, that everybody has access to high quality, nutritious, sustainable food. But also that we make sure that food is produced in a way that is good for the environment, is good for animals, and is crucially fair to the people that are producing and working in the food system. I could totally go into one about kind of wages and agricultural wages, but this probably isn't quite the right place for it. Yes, so setting up an independent food commission. So the Scottish, this is all part of the Good Food Nation bill, I should say, sorry, should have mentioned that. So the Scottish Food Coalition are advocating for a Good Food Nation bill. The Good Food Nation bill has been something that the Scottish Government have committed to for years now, but they keep shelving. Last year they shelved it because COVID, obviously, but before that they shelved it because it was just too difficult. And these are the key asks of the Scottish Food Coalition that we as members think should be part of a Good Food Nation bill. And as part of that, it is setting up a separate food commission that can sort of carry out these functions and make sure that everything makes sense, essentially, and also provide independent reports on progress rather than the government reporting on its own progress. Food plans, local food plans. This is the sort of thing that local authorities are being urged to make, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But yeah, we need a collective approach to our future food system. We need it to be sustainable. We need it to be based on the right to food. It might as well be linked to Sustainable Development Goals because there's been some great work going into that already. And some people might already be aware of the National Performance Framework, also some great collaborative work around the country going into that. So yeah, a plan so that everybody knows what we're doing and what the direction is for a sustainable food future. Targets are a bit of an obvious one. Halving the environmental impact of the food system by 2030 would be great, and also childhood obesity. In fact, all of these are brilliant. Yeah, again, advocated by the Scottish Food Coalition. And then also finally, sorry, I can't actually see what it says up there, but yeah, the National Food Plan priority should incorporate procurement issues. Procurement for me is a massive game changer. So this means more sustainable, locally sourced food in our public institutions, in schools, in hospitals. These are the main buyers of food. There already are frameworks out there. The Soil Association has, I'll come back to that, Food for Life, which I'll talk about in just a minute. Here we go. That was a good link in. So the Soil Association Scotland. So lots of you will have heard the Soil Association. They are the main body for certifying organic farmers around the UK. Well, that's not all they do. This is a few of their other programmes. So Food for Life is an initiative that is led by the Soil Association, pioneered by their team. And it basically encourages local authorities, NHS procurement buyers to sign up to Food for Life in order to prioritise buying locally sourced sustainable food. Now, a lot of procurement experts or procurement managers in local authorities think that's too difficult and that they're bound by certain frameworks. However, East Ayrshire have been doing it for 10 years. They're Food for Life Gold. That means that 70% of the food that they're serving their school children comes from local and sustainable producers. So it is possible. It's totally possible. Any council official that tells you it's not possible is talking nonsense. Innovative Farmers Programme. It's a great programme, brilliant. Loads and loads of peer-to-peer stuff. And I think statistics show, through the Farming for 1.5 that I mentioned earlier, that farmers that engage in peer-to-peer workshops and sharing groups around sustainable regenerative farming practices are much more likely to take these up. So there's some great field labs, they call them field labs, and lots of different farms sort of participate as to be a sort of, you know, permanent lab, looking at things like soil, looking at things like agroforestry, all sorts of different topics that are very relevant to our farmers and our farming systems. So if you are a farmer, then it's worth looking that up and getting involved. And of course, Soil Association, being the home of organics in the UK, they fly the flag for organics, and Organic Your September is one of their flagship campaigns. I mentioned the Land Workers Alliance earlier. Land Workers Alliance is a UK-wide network, or union even, of small-scale agroecological producers. I've mentioned the word agroecological a few times. It literally means what it sounds like, agriculture and ecological. Combine those two things, agroecological. So a lot of Land Workers Alliance members are market gardeners. There are, I think, there's about 6 of us in Dumfries and Galloway. There's a growing number. I'm personally the D&G rep for the Land Workers Alliance policy committee. We've just taken on some additional capacity in Scotland. So we have a policy and campaigns officer, and we will be launching a sort of very public campaign, but also lobbying our new agriculture minister, who hopefully will be better at listening than the last one, and less tied into sort of business as usual agriculture. And these are the key asks. These are the things that we're asking for. So yeah, we want more than anything, we want to see more agroecological producers, and personally for me that means more vegetables, and everything else that you can see here. And again, happy to share the slides afterwards, but I also have a 3-page policy sort of briefing that's very, very readable, if you'd like me to share that afterwards as well. Other great work happening across the UK is the Organic Growers Alliance. Again, it's a network of growers and small-scale farmers and horticulturalists or market gardeners. I'm a paid-up member, but yeah, not hold any special place in their team. Again, peer-to-peer stuff, which is really, really useful. Lots of skill sharing, lots of information sharing. For farmers, larger scale farmers who really want to get on board with nature-friendly farming, as in addition to the Soil Association, there is the Nature Friendly Farming Network, which again, knowledge sharing, peer-to-peer sort of stuff, brilliant work. So yeah, lots of good stuff happening there. And then away from farming and food production is Sustainable Food Places. Now, Sustainable Food Places is a UK-wide network. It's a partnership between Soil Association, which I've talked about already, Food Matters, who are a food think tank, and Sustain, who are a food and sustainable food and agriculture lobbying alliance. Sustainable Food Places is a sort of membership network of sustainable food partnerships. And a sustainable food partnership is a cross-sector group that brings together the council, the NHS, community food organisations, food businesses and hospitality, farmers, and anyone that's working in the food system in across a region. So it used to be city-based, and now it's kind of gone regional. So a good example of that, something that I've just finished working on this, although I will continue working on it, is the Glasgow City Food Plan. So for the last few years, I've sat on the Glasgow Food Policy Partnership, which is this cross-sector group, putting together all these different actors from across the stakeholders from across the food system. And in the last 2 years, we have been working really hard on this, the Glasgow City Food Plan. It covers all these different themes: food procurement and catering, food poverty, food economy, children, young people, environment and community food. And it's underpinned by these ethics of equity, sustainability and health. There's 76 cross-cutting actions, and it's been co-created by about 80 different organisations, from the Scottish Grocers Federation to unions, to all sorts of different people, sustainable restaurant associations, etc. Yeah, and we as a core team have worked really hard to make sure that it makes sense, that all these different actions in the city food plan kind of speak to each other and support each other. And we'll be reviewing that on an annual basis. So that's the Glasgow version. And this is the start of the Dumfries and Galloway version. So yeah, in the recent months, since June last year, a small group, a working group have been meeting. And you can see the partnership members here, the council, NHS, National Farmers Union, the Biosphere, Eat South West Scotland are representing hospitality and food businesses, Scottish Lands and Estates representing more farmers, and then we've got a couple of kind of local developments forums, local community forums as part of that as well. One thing that is missing in Dumfries and Galloway actually is a community food network. There's no overarching network of community food organisations, and that's something that we're looking at putting some resource towards to helping make that happen. So there's a sort of some organisation or network that's got a mandate to speak on behalf of community food organisations. And by community food, I mean groups that are engaged in things like community gardening, and healthy cooking and food education, but also things like sort of ensuring equal access to affordable, good, healthy food through things like community fridges. So this is a really exciting piece of work, and something that I've been coordinating over the last few months. So there are ways to get involved with this one. You can go to the Dumfries and Galloway D&G Sustainable Food Partnership. Sorry, I haven't put it on there. dgsustainablefoodpartnership.org website. And if you scroll down on that website, there's 3 different surveys that you can answer if you're a community food organisation, if you're hospitality sector, or if you're a farmer or food producer. And there's also, if you're none of those things, there's a mailing list you can sign up to, and we're going to be doing monthly updates on all things sustainable foods. And later in the year, we'll be hosting local food gatherings across 4 different areas across D&G, bringing together anybody who's working in the food system in any given area. So hopefully somewhere coming to a venue near you in real life. That'll be nice, won't it? Okay, giving this one a flag up. It only exists on Facebook at the moment. I don't know if Mary Patterson's in the audience, but she's kind of spearheaded this one really, and has support from myself and lots of others. So it's a great Facebook group and also a page, and the stated aim of raising awareness to reduce food miles, celebrate locally sourced in-season food by sharing all these stories from across the entire region. So if you're on the social media, if you're on Facebook, then please do join that. And share your information, anything that you've got, because we already kind of flagged up the issues with kind of food production. We know what some of the solutions are, but we need to know where we can access that. And by building a citizen movement, we can have a sort of louder collective voice, and that's really important. Some of the great projects that are happening already across D&G. So I've kind of tried to give a little bit of a spread here. I've mentioned Tor Organic Dairy already. They're based near Auchinken, and some of you will know they've got the refill milk machines both in Earlscross and Castle Douglas, and in the Auchinken community shop. The Guild will be familiar to some as a Dumfries arts-based organisation mostly, but they are setting up a community kitchen at the moment. So that's watch that space for that. They're looking for funding for it at the moment. Fed Up Community Cafe addresses food poverty and food insecurity over in Stranraer. And the Sandside Community Garden is, not surprisingly, in Dumfries, in the Sandside area. Kate's Kitchen is Annan, and that's also a project set up to address food insecurity in that area. And then I've got a couple of photos. I couldn't find a logo for Incredible Edibles Stranraer, but I know they've been doing some amazingly great work over the last few months. and particularly planting lots and lots of fruit trees in local primary schools, which is yay. I mean, orchards, wonderful. And then the bottom left, we've got some very enthusiastic people in the Gareth Walled Garden, which is a community garden just outside New Galloway. Half Moon Gardens on the Machers, Edible Gardens over on the Rins, both of whom are small social enterprises, kind of really kind of pushing for kind of sustainable horticulture and sort of permaculture based solutions that are grassroots and community led. I put this one in a sort of short notice. This is I kind of thought, well, you know, we should probably talk about a little bit about kind of the move to a vegan diet. I know that the Caris is going to kind of cover some of these, the importance of eating less meat in your diet. I guess the question is, how do we marry some of these statistics, the rise in kind of in vegan diets, the rise in demand for vegan food, with what we've just been talking about with regards to kind of Scottish agriculture as it stands at the moment. Well, you know, we can do that. We can do it by getting involved in lots of these campaigns and these organisations and these groups, and adding your voice and saying this is what we need, because it's pretty hard to buy local at the moment. It's pretty hard to buy plant-based food at the moment if you want to buy locally sourced. But people clearly want to, and we can see that through this research that's been done. Okay. I'm pretty much at the end here. I'm very sorry if I've gone well over time, but I hope these are the take-home messages, that our food system is broken, but it is not beyond repair. That there is loads that can be done, and that work can be done and is being done by collaborative work through network building, and it needs more people to get involved in it. Livestock farming can be sustainable if farmers are willing and crucially supported to make a transition to regenerative and agricultural farming systems. And hopefully we'll be seeing a change in the farm payment systems after 2024, which will support more climate friendly farming and more what we call public money for public goods and ecosystem services. This is what we want. Farmers want to do the right thing, but at the moment there's basically no support out there to help farmers to do that. But how do we make that happen? By people getting involved. So politicians make decisions about purse strings and budgets, but they listen to voters. The farming group is a fairly small lobbying group. So we need you to get involved, to push for this change. We need you to understand what the issues are, and we need you to join in with your voice and say, this is we need a transition towards sustainable farming. You know, come on, Scottish government, let's support these farmers do the right thing. And finally, also get involved, of course, in community-led grassroots projects. I've just highlighted a very small number of them in my last slide there, but there's loads and they're growing. There's loads and loads of local producers. There's loads and loads of producer markets and farmers markets. So yeah, all of whom need your support. And the only way that we can encourage more people to do more local production is by more people supporting these producers, and giving others the confidence to go, I can do that as well. So I hope these are take-home messages, and I hope this has been interesting and not overwhelming. And I'm going to stop the share there and hand back to Helen.
Oh, well, fantastic. Thank you, Abby. That was a counter through some stats, but I love some stats, so I was fine with that. Really eye-opening, really interesting to see the scale of the problem, but also to see how many people are working together to fix it. And obviously there's so many things to consider, and we've had some great questions in, so you know we can discuss that. But it's all about balance, isn't it? It's all about moving step by step towards a system that we can sustain as a nation. I don't think we're telling anyone what to do, but it's getting informed so that you can make the really good decisions. And I think that your point about the conflict between that push to buy shop local, but then you can't necessarily get what you want. That's an interesting conflict as well. So yeah, I'll just bring in some questions. Right, Sarah Simpson, who I think is looks like she's quite well informed dairy, I'm going to guess, from the questions, is sort of raising the point about the balance of the argument that's required, and a sequestration of grassland that supports dairy and beef cattle. And then I thought this was a really interesting point. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through to find it. And again, this comes into the balance, doesn't it? Organic food has higher greenhouse gas emissions per unit than conventional farming. If all food was produced organically, it would increase emissions by 21%. Is that something that you see in your research?
There's various different research, and I think this is probably a very true fact that you can find any research that backs up any claims on the internet. But I think on balance, the response to that is that's probably not true. What has been shown through various reports is that organic farming has a lower yield, but that is generally comparing like for like, and not looking at whole farm systems. So yeah, when we're talking about much broader issues like carbon sequestration, like increased biodiversity, organic wins on every level. So switching organic farms switching a farming system to an organic system and incorporating more organic methods essentially is much better for local ecology, for local biodiversity, and increases carbon sequestration, generally speaking. But yeah, it's definitely a fraught area, and there's no, farmers come in all shapes and sizes, and there is no consensus amongst the farming community at this point anyway about what we should be doing, and as I say, you can find any kind of evidence to back up claims. That's a fact. But yeah, I think broadly speaking, I would disagree with that assertion.
All right. That's an interesting one. I don't want to get too much into that because I think most of the people around here are not farmer. It's not peer-to-peer, farmer to farmer. So we'll go to some of the more local questions. Moving from Glasgow to Galloway, I don't know how much you were gardening up in Glasgow, I know. But what are the trends for what grows well in Galloway compared to the rest of the UK? What should we be concentrating on? Are there things that are particularly well suited for this climate?
Yeah, I mean, that's tricky from a personal perspective, my lived experience. I've lived in Scotland for 23 years, so that's my entire adult life. And so I've only really ever been a grower in Scotland, apart from when I was sort of working in a market garden in the 90s in West Wales. However, I am linked into a kind of, obviously, a wide network of market gardeners across the country. And not just Scotland, but across the UK. And clearly, my peers further south can grow a sort of much broader range of crops outdoors than I'm able to. But anything's possible undercover. So anyone's welcome to come along on a Thursday afternoon and come and see the gardens here. We've got a polytunnel currently full of salads. The cucumbers are coming on. The beans are coming up. The tomatoes are looking very strong and healthy indeed. And then outside, brassicas galore. So that's sorry for people that aren't gardeners. That's broccoli, cabbages, kale, etc., and that kind of thing. The beetroots are looking amazing. I mean, obviously the sun in the last few days has really helped. But yeah, protected growing and creating protected growing environments is really key to increasing production. And when it comes to soil types, I think people say you can't grow vegetables in Galloway because of all the rock. Well, you can build soil. You can add organic matter, and you can work with what you've got to basically create sort of better growing mediums. And we're running a workshop actually on the 31st of July, all about soil, where you can come and learn more about that topic.
Brilliant.
Yeah, here is the list.
That needs to go up on our website, but it's available through your Facebook site as well, isn't it? Yeah.
There's only about 5 places left, I think.
Yeah. Here's a great question from Elizabeth. Do you see Scotland, or Dumfries and Galloway, or even Scotland, being able to produce vegetable-based protein at any scale? So lentils and beans, such that we could reduce our reliance on imported beans and pulses. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably not lentils, but definitely other legumes are available. Runner beans grow particularly well. They can also called borlotti beans in some places. And peas. Oh my gosh, we can grow so many peas. I'm on the peas. Peas are great. Yeah, they're really good, and they're nitrogen fixing as well. So they're sort of double whammy. They're kind of really good for kind of, you know, feeding other crops around them, for enriching the soil. And yeah, our pea crop was amazing last year. It's looking amazing this year as well already. So yeah, it is totally possible both in Scotland and the rest of the UK. And there's some really good trials going on. The SRUC are really good at their research side of things. And they got a bit of a way to go to marry their research and their teaching, because they teach very conventional farming, but actually their research stuff is very much about sustainable agriculture. And yeah, they've got some really good crop trials going on with legume production at the moment across Scotland. And some people will know already about hobmadods, which is, they're quite a lot further south, down in England, but they produce a huge range of legumes. They're doing it incredibly well. So lots of learning there from people who are just a few hundred miles south of here.
Oh, fascinating. So yeah, and again, that's making me think that it's a question of not saying I would like this where and we can only grow it overseas. It's a what can we grow locally, and what's that giving me in terms of what I want and what I need. So yeah. Brilliant. Kath said, and you may not know the answer to this, but it sounds like a great idea to me. Are town planners considering surrounding our major population centres with market gardens? Have you got any sniff of that?
No, not at the moment, but they should be. No, so in the Glasgow context, because COVID, right, I've been able to carry on working on Glasgow-based projects, and one of the projects I'm working on is called the Food and Climate Action Project, where one of our partners in that is Sustain, who I mentioned earlier as part of the Scottish the Sustainable Food Partnership Coalition, and yeah, we're on a project called Fringe Farming, so we're working with the local authority up there to look at, you know, the council's assets essentially. And how we can repurpose and use some of those for market gardening and increased sort of localized food production. Yeah, there's one, as far as I know, one new market garden just popped up in Dumfries. It's Barnhill. I think it's Barnhill. I'll send a link for it later. I'll find it and send it. But yeah, it's early days with the D&G Food Partnership, but that's the kind of vehicle that I think could help to push for kind of exactly that, for looking at kind of, okay, how can we utilise the land around urban centres and town centres to kind of, yeah, increase food production.
Yeah, take it to where it's needed. No, that's really interesting. McNabb seems to be keen on tripe. This is a sort of food waste question, and things that normally maybe grandma and granddad were better at it, bones for soup and how to cook tripe. But I think Jenny might have answered that with the Love Food Hate Waste programme run by Zero Waste Scotland. I think there's loads of stuff out there for that. Yeah. I'm
not sure they talk about tripe specifically, but yeah, Love Food Hate Waste is a really good one. We when we dispatched our pigs last year, sort of got through most of them so far, the rest is in the freezer, but I did totally plan to make a fertiliser out of the bones, and I never got around to it. But it makes a great fertiliser. If you can, very time consuming.
Yeah, I bet. Lots of reading ideas coming in, which is great. Leslie's suggested the TikTok foodies, Alpha Foodie. Leslie's been enjoying that. Is a vegan foodie, so that, she says, there's some really good recipes there. And Dave, I think this is such an important point from Dave Stevenson, that you know, and it comes back to your sort of food justice and social justice interlocking. You know, low-income families, lack of access to affordable fresh produce, and the food banks sometimes don't do that. Now, I know that that exact thing prompted Piper Booth and EcoCD. Well, I think they knew that. Sorry about that, everyone. Yes, EcoCD, which is a new initiative by the Castle Douglas Development Forum. Piper Booth was picked up on that, and I think that prompted her lettuce project to grow lettuces in local primary schools to support their Stepping Stones food bank. But yeah, you know, it's a big deal. I guess that's where the community comes in, because the food banks usually are at a community level, and then the community gardening can support that where the need is the most.
Yeah, I mean, community gardening is a tricky one to sort of, you can't really rely on community gardening, in my experience, to provide food for food banks. Community gardening is much more about sort of social inclusion, confidence building, bringing people together and having a nice time. Food is a happy byproduct of that, but I've been working in community gardening for like 15 years, and I've always said it's more about growing people than it is about growing vegetables. Again, you know, I think setting up community-led market gardens is a step forwards, and small-scale social enterprises, and then working alongside. I'm not going to say food banks. I'm going to say things like pantry models and community fridges, because we need to move away from food banks being there's your bag of food, you know, off you go, kind of thing. And the pantry model is it's a much more dignified way of people on low incomes accessing food. You pay a very small amount of money, like £1 a month for your subscription, and you get to go in and basically do your shopping. But it is usually surplus food through Fair Share, or again, the Glasgow project that I'm kind of connected to. We're looking at kind of setting up a big sort of urban market garden, community-led market garden, and working alongside the pantries to make sure that people have got equal access to that. Another really good project is the Alexandra Rose vouchers, and they in London have a program called the Beetroot Bond. Don't know quite enough about it, but the idea is that sort of families on low incomes are able to access local grown produce. And they do that through a voucher scheme. But that obviously requires third-party funding, which is a bit of a shame. So
it all ties into.
Yeah, but it's a major issue, and something that I'm personally really passionate about, is making sure that, you know, and I have a bit of a bugbear about that myself as a market gardener. You know, there's no way that market garden is going to generate any income if I reduce the cost of my salad bags. People at the Glen Pens can afford it, but you know, the people living in the east end of Glasgow definitely can't. So, yeah, it's again, I think it comes down to sort of farm payments, and who's eligible for farm payments. And small scale producers like myself are excluded from any kind of payment systems at the moment. So.
Interesting, and harking back to the integrated discussion and solution, isn't it? I'm conscious of the time, so I want to hand over to Caris just now, but Abby, that was brilliant, really interesting, loads of food for thought, and I think the point of all of these things is just to be informed, do your own research and make your own choices, but do it from a point of view of understanding. So that's a really good introduction to the wild world of food sustainability. So but if I'll just hand over to Caris now, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you very much, Helen. So speaking about knowledge and all the misinformation out there and where do we start, I'm going to hopefully support us on a bit of that. So let me get my slides up. Here we go. So the message I want everyone to take away is that any change will make a difference, but it's knowing how to make the right change. And that's where the Giki steps come in. So we're going to hark back to that. These are just 5 examples. There are many more out there talking about what we eat and how we can change that to make positive impacts. They've done the homework for you, so you can be confident in what you're doing and making the right choices. But just in the wider world, so I'm going to cover 3 topics, and it's going to be a very whistle-stop tour. We're going to talk about kind of diets, food waste, or at least food that is wasted, and then sort of actually buying the products. So I think the elephant in the room, whenever we talk about food and carbon footprints and healthy diets and whatnot, is about vegan and vegetarianism. Now, this graph is showing gigatons of carbon dioxide and equivalent greenhouse gas savings if everybody globally picked up a certain diet. So we know vegan and vegetarianism are going to be up there in changes, but there's also things like flexitarian. So that is where 75% of your meat and dairy are replaced by cereals and pulses. There's the healthy diet. So we saw that plate earlier. So it'll probably be either the same thing or very similar. And in the UK, if everybody ate that way, we would be cutting 17% of our greenhouse gas emissions from the overall food production story. Pescetarian is self-explanatory. Fair and frugal, that is kind of assuming everybody globally has the same amount to eat. So I think it's about 2,800 calories a day. And there's assumes a low amount of animal products in there. And then the climate carnivore is where you replace 75% of your red meat with other meat. And then, again, the Mediterranean diet is fairly self-explanatory. So basically, this graph is hopefully telling you that you don't have to do a fully vegan and vegetarianism. If that's not a choice that is interesting to you, it won't be a sustainable one for you to make. However, doing a meat-free Monday or just vegetarian lunches or choosing seasonal fruit and veg, anything like that can make a difference. And hopefully that kind of empowers you to know that just cutting out a little bit or changing how you do or just eating healthier is kind of what is a step in the right direction. You don't have to go the full 9 yards. And talking about food waste. So food waste is kind of a term that leads us down a different road. What it really means is food that is wasted. So it's still oftentimes perfectly safe for us to eat. So down here we have a graph talking about the global greenhouse gas emissions, and this is from the whole of the food production, the whole of the food production system. Now, the red part here is consumer waste. So we have the waste part in itself is 6%. Consumer waste is about 2% of that. So that is what our individual actions can do, and this is global. So that ends up being a huge impact if we can take care of our own food waste. There's lots of ways to find out how you can take care of your food waste. I'm sure plenty of you have, your own ways of doing things, from composting to making broth out of vegetable scraps, and so on and so forth. But I wanted to kind of highlight things that maybe we haven't thought about so much. So these are where the newfangled apps come in. So these are just 3 of the really good apps that I have found or I sometimes use. So Plant Jammer, for example, is one that you can select the ingredients that you have left over, and that gives you recipe ideas, but also talks about the nutritional value of those recipes that you're having. Too Good to Go is where shops and restaurants, supermarkets, hotels, whatever, they can sell their surplus food in a little mystery bag. You pay a heavy discount for that food, so they still get some money for it, but it's food that would be wasted otherwise. And there are places in Dumfries, Galloway that are signed up to this. So I think all the Gregs are, for example, and there's other places in Dumfries itself. I haven't looked further afield, but it might be worth just downloading and having a quick look to see if there's nowhere near you, and maybe even talking to local, restaurant owners or whatnot to see if they want to sign up. And then there's Olio, which is basically if you can get, your community or your neighbors to sign up, you can trade things that you're not going to use up. So I think sometimes if you're, cooking for 1 or 2, you can't buy things that are just in 1 or 2, you kind of 2 courgettes come and you're not going to use the other one, and you kind of have to find a different recipe for it, and it messes up your whole meal plan. But if you can give it to someone else who's going to use it, that's fantastic. This one requires a little bit, more talking to the community, especially in sort of rural area rather than a city. But it might be something that you'd be interested in. I wanted to highlight that. So there's loads of different ways to tackle food waste. I'm sure there's plenty of options out there that you know about. I just wanted to kind of talk about ones that maybe aren't pulled up as often. Okay, so that was the food waste whistle-stop tour. Now we're talking about food products and the actual buying of food products. And whenever we're buying something, I think what we need to be aware of nowadays is greenwashing. So there's this very technical description here, but basically greenwashing is using disinformation to make yourself seem more environmentally friendly than you are. So sometimes that can be outright lying. Sometimes that can be just using obscure language. Sometimes that can be just being very vague in your promises of what you're doing. And this applies to governments, to food productions, to organizations. It can apply to anybody. In particular, when we're talking about food, is these empty words. So the thing is, producers can and will use false advertising. If they can get away with it, they probably will use it unless they're an ethical company. And so sometimes these words can even be things like organic and free range and natural and so on. I would always be wary of them unless they're backed up by third-party certification, because those words in themselves, they're often not legislated. They don't have to mean a certain thing by law, or if they do, it doesn't often match up with what you and I would think, for example. And there's a link down there at the bottom that I'll maybe ask Helen to pop around later, but ethical.net, a guide to greenwashing. It talks about greenwashing, but also the 7 ways in which greenwashing happens, and it can be really good to just familiarize yourself with them. Even certifications, though, sometimes they can be not entirely honest, or at least they don't always match up with what we think that they mean. So I've got 2 examples here, they're very different. So the first one is from Dolphin Safe Tuna. Now this has come under controversy of late. This article was on 2015, but last year there has been, I think, a lawsuit against some American companies that use dolphin safe tuna labels. And that's because it's the companies themselves who are fishing the tuna that fund this label. And so it behooves them to have low standards and easy guidelines. And then you're buying the dolphin safe tuna thinking you're doing something really good, when in actuality it does not match up with your expectations at all. And unfortunately, the dolphin safe tuna, in reality, it only does not have to harm a substantial amount of dolphins. So that does not mean dolphin safe, or at least I don't think it means dolphin safe. And then the second example here isn't, because there's controversy or because it's lying or anything. It's the RSPCA assured standards. So free range chickens, when indoors, there has to be up to, 13. There can be up to 13 chickens per meter square of space. They have to have a minimum range of a meter square when outdoors and so on. It's good to know this because that might mean better than you thought that free range chickens had. It might mean, less than you thought free range chickens had. But knowing what these guidelines mean when we're buying these certifications means that we have that power, and we know that we're putting our consumer power to good use, and we can have faith in the choices that we're making. Now that can be a little bit overwhelming, but a quick Google is typically all you need, because if a certification or if a company is doing something good, they typically make it very obvious, very accessible and very clear. Whereas if it's kind of difficult to find, or if it's vague language, then they probably have something to hide. Okay, so that was really, really quick. And I just wanted to kind of finish off by saying, if you're overwhelmed, that's perfectly understandable. But we are talking about taking one step at a time. So last month, Anna Pitt was saying about how she, only had a trash bag of waste every year, but that took her several years to get to. And she was building habits as she went. She didn't do this overnight. And we're not asking anybody to make, to get down to that 2.5 tons of carbon emissions every year overnight. The best thing to do is to make a habit, make sure it works for you, make sure it's sustainable, make sure it's good for the earth, and make sure it's ingrained in your lifestyle, and then start building on the next one. And luckily, there are already several places out there that have done the legwork for you that can tell you, what the steps can be, and what difference that they can make, and so on and so forth. And so Giki is one of those examples. And I very much recommend signing up if you haven't already. You don't need to necessarily join the team, and it's free, but it gives you those good ideas. You don't need to reinvent the wheel, basically. You can choose one of these steps, like the seasonal fruit and veg. It's not saying you have to make sure it's local. You don't have to make sure it's organic, just seasonal. And that's very easy information to find. And then once you've done that, maybe you can make the next step, and that it's seasonal organic fruit and veg, or whichever. You can choose a different step, and that's the much more sustainable way of doing things, and it's certainly a good place to start. And I just want to finish off before I hand back to Helen. So some kind of resources out there. There's ethicalconsumer.org, and that's a fantastic place for buying anything. Basically, they've done the legwork and the homework, and they can tell you, yes, this company has scored this amount, or this company does this but doesn't do this. And if you're okay with that, then go ahead and get that product. There's also Our World in Data and Carbon Brief, and that's where I got all this information from, or at least most of the information. That's where the graphs came from as well. And if you're interested in reading up about food production or in general carbon footprint information, those two places are really good places to start. And then again, these are some YouTube videos. I just wanted to put these in here to show there's so much information out there. I just put in, you know, kind of food waste or reducing food waste or zero waste shopping, and it came up with so many different options. So there's no need to try and do everything yourself, because we're all working together, or most of us are working together to make fantastic changes. And hopefully you all join the Galloway team and we can make fantastic choices together. And on that note, I will hand back to Helen. So thank you everyone for listening. And let's just stop sharing my screen. There we go. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks, Caris. A whistle-stop tour, but loads of really good information. I think it is so interesting. I think the empty words of advertising are really important ones to look out for. You know, if it's not certified, it quite probably doesn't mean anything. Yeah, and that plant jammer one, I like the idea of that with the recipes. I'd like to see what they made of the contents of my fridge sometimes, but it's worth a shot. So yeah, no, absolutely brilliant. Leslie suggested that you try a food waste diary, and eye-opening. I bet it is. Yeah, so that would be an interesting thing to do for a week, to see where the waste was coming into your system. So I think there's some terrible statistic about bags of lettuce going straight in the bin unopened, isn't there? So yeah, you know, if that's happening again and again, buy them from Hidden Veg instead. 3 weeks, Leslie says, for a food week diary to get the full effect. But yes, brilliant. I'm just going to, I've got a very few slides here about some of the community options local to the Galloway Glettons area. So if I just pull those up. Yes, so if you can see that we're well served for producers markets. We're really very lucky in that respect. So there's the Glen Kens Producers Market on the second Saturday of the month in Dalry, and that's also got an online click and collect now, which is fantastic, through the Open Food Network, Food Hub. So if you just Google that, you'll find it, and it opens before the market, and then you can pick it up from the market, pay online. Brilliant. Castle Douglas has got its producers market on the third Sunday of the month, and Kirkcudbright on the fourth Sunday of the month. So, and they all source local food producers selling their wares there. I mean, there's so much locally produced food, I got a bit overwhelmed, and we'll all have our own personal links. But so I sort of concentrate on ones that have got shops. So there's the Hidden Veg, which is Abbey and the Glen Kens. There's the Earth's Crust Bakery in Castle Douglas. They make all their bread there. I think we're very well served for butchers, certainly in Castle Douglas, and I think in Kirkcudbright as well. Upper Delarg Eggs in Balmaclellan, they're free range eggs available up there, and then Kirkcudbright in particular has got a lot of bakeries as well that cook on site. So so we're very lucky, and if you keep you know, it's like Caris said, it's choosing where we put our money in a thoughtful and knowing way is the key. We have got some growing projects going on. Abby had that fantastic photo of some of the Ling volunteers at the Garrick Ward Garden. That's a kind of combination of a community garden and allotments. So I know they're always open to new volunteers. It's sunning up there now. There's a Stewartry community garden just in there, so it's a fledgling project based around the rugby football club and the CrossFit just outside Castle Douglas. So that I know they're again open to volunteers there. Eco CD in Castle Douglas is a Castle Douglas Development Forum project, and they've got lots of plans, including sort of tree planting, wildflower planting. But their lettuce project was getting primary school children growing lettuces, which is fantastic. Now there was talk of community allotments in Kirkcudbright, and I don't know if anybody on the chat will be able to fill me in. I think it's stalled, possibly due to COVID, but I know there was certainly a lot of enthusiasm for community allotments in Kirkcudbright. There's a community garden planned for Balmaclellan, so that's in progress. And in New Galloway, there was a lovely initiative, I think it was 2 years ago now, where a load of really quite substantial growing containers popped up as if by magic around the village, and they all grow edible food in them. So so there's plenty out there, and again, it's knowing where to look. I think there's some questions coming in here. I'm just trying to think what I forgot. Oh yes, and then the other steps that I had down, which is kind of the point of these, is to get informed. You know, do your research and form your personal choices that work for you from it. If you want to add your voice, lend your voice to matters that are important to you, you can contact your elected representatives. That's what they're there for. And Abby mentioned the D&G Sustainable Food Partnership, if you're an organisation. So I think this topic of all the topics that we're doing it is about your personal choices and your personal actions, but it's also, I think we've learned this evening about being part of something bigger. If there's something that's important to you, lending your voice to that will help. So we've got some ideas coming in here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so Caris and Abby can talk. Yeah, Caris said the cafe and farm shop at Loch Arthur. Yeah, that's really, really good. Yeah, Scenic eggs in Castle Douglas. Yeah, fantastic. Yes, so Leslie was asking why locally produced chicken is an issue. And Abby's answered that to say there's just not enough production, especially free range or outdoor reared. So yeah, I guess you can just keep asking in the butchers for them. I hope it takes effect. Are there any plans for a Galloway Glens project on encouraging more local veg growing initiatives, please? Well, I think Hidden Veg has got a small grant through us, which is, it's not quite the answer to that, is it, Abby? But that's workshops around the subject.
Sort of, yeah. I mean, we've got the next one's on soil, and then the one after it's more about rural land-based skills. So we're doing dry stone diking and scything, which is not about food growing at all.
Not about it. Well, so Rachel, the short answer is no, not at the moment, but we are always keen to make partnerships with the community organisations. So we've got our small grant scheme available to community organisations, and we've got a community activities programme. So yeah, if you are a community group and you've got plans and you're in the Galloway Glens area, then get in touch, absolutely. Leslie's got more great ideas. Seed shares between neighbours. Yeah, I mean, fantastic. There's so much that can be done. There was a potato day in Gatehouse. That sounds awesome.
So I've got something on that. Potato day moved to Wigton.
Oh right, okay.
They tried it in Gatehouse. It didn't really work apparently.
Okay.
So that's what Mary told me, who organised it. But it happens in Wigton instead.
Oh, very good. More potato fans in Wigton. Lovely. And Keda, am I saying that right? Farm and Pantry?
I think it's Kedda.
Kedda.
But anyway, it's over by Dumfries.
Mm.
Yeah.
So yes, absolutely, loads of stuff going on in this area as we know, but always more to do. Anna Harvis said it'd be great if kids at school were shown how to grow fruit and veg. And somebody else mentioned earlier, and I kind of skipped over it, about is there need for sort of, here we are, it was Elizabeth. Does the work to make local food available need to be supported by work to increase cooking and nutrition skills? And yes, it is all part of that, embedding these principles in all of us, but also in younger people. I think that's absolutely true.
It might be worth saying that the sort of Learning for Sustainability partnership and sustainability is very much on the curriculum, and it's increasing. It's not just about food, but it is about sustainability in general. I imagine food is on the agenda there, and so hopefully teachers will be teaching that more in schools. Yeah,
that's a brilliant point, Caris. And of course, the Crichton Carbon Centre has been sort of leader in educational and sustainable education for decades now. So yeah, the system is opening up. Leslie's saying a food and drink technologies foundation apprenticeship in the senior phase, so that's for kind of S5, S6 pupils. But yeah, but poor uptake. It's interesting, very interesting. I'm aware of the time, so I'm going to, I think, I wanted to just share my screen for those of you who are interested in, where am I? Right, now I know that some of you are Team Galloway, so we launched it at the event, the first event last month, this time last month. We've got 34 members at the moment, which is absolutely brilliant. And the progress of those people in a month has been to save 686 kilos of carbon. I thought that was tons. I'll look that up and make sure that's right. But thousands of litres of water saved, and single-use plastic saved going to the sea. So I'm going to report on this every month, and we'll see how the team builds up and how the achievements happen. Because if you look at our so our team score, I should say, is 556, which is not too bad at all. If you break that down here, you can see here that this is Team Galloway sitting here at 556. This is the UK average. So as a group, we're doing brilliantly. The target, this 2.5 tons, is still a little way to go, but there's more to be done. But really interesting to see how all the effects come in. And what I thought was interesting was to see the breakdown of that. So here we go. So it's transport and food neck and neck. So as a team, as a community, that's where our carbon emissions are coming from. So particularly based around that, today's discussion, that's ever so interesting. Home is a close third, and next month's event is the key speakers there are going to be from Home Energy Scotland, talking to us about how we can make, all individually take our own actions to bring down the impact of our homes on our personal carbon footprints. Purchase is very low, so I think that doesn't surprise me, actually. I don't think we're a particularly materialistic community around here. So and I guess maybe the transport is high because it is a rural community, people having to go places. So very, very interesting. And again, it's as we just keep saying, knowledge is power, and when you know about something, then you can start to make the choices to change it. But having said that, if everybody lived like Team Galloway, and if we are committed to limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees, then we've got 8 years and 7 months until the global carbon budget runs out. So I found that quite sobering, actually, I have to say. So I think that goes back to the original slide about this is the decade for action. This is the time. If you're going to do it now. And I sense a change. I sense a real change in the air. I think people are starting to take the actions to make these differences. So I don't, if you cast your mind back to Giki, you can say what you've done, but you can also say what steps you're planning to take. So here, remember that number was 696 there's 37,000 kilograms committed to being saved by our team if everybody does the steps they've committed to. So so I just wanted to say, keep going. It's really good to measure where you are, but then the key thing is making the actions and doing the changes, and together we can add it all up and see where we get to. So I think that was all that I wanted to say on it. It's 9 o'clock. I can hear a child rattling the door behind me in an illicit kind of way. More information, you can stay up to date. Facebook, Twitter and Instagram is @Galloway Glens. This is myself. I said before, if you'd like to be in contact, myself, helen.kerran@dumgal.gov.uk for a Galloway Glens mailing list, gallowayglens.org. We put this and all the recordings on YouTube, so if you want to share them or if you want to catch up on ones that you missed, then go have a look on YouTube for Galloway Glens. And as I say, we've got 2 more of these to go. It's the first Wednesday of every month, so 7th of July inside the home and 4th of August outside the home. I will send around an email with all the links and a summary slide pack before the end of the week. And yes, I think just to say thank you so much to Abby and Caris. Really, really interesting. I've got some great feedback there and some good ideas coming in. Some more good ideas. Sarah Bridle's book, Food and Climate Change Without the Hot Air. Okay, that sounds good. Lovely. Yes. No. So I think that's all I wanted to say. So thank you all very much for coming. I appreciate it, especially on a sunny June evening. Now the weather's finally here. So thanks for coming. I'm not going to end the meeting because I find it a bit abrupt, but I'll just leave you all to hang up, and hopefully we'll see you at the next one.